Hey, my name's Cody. I'm calling from Denver.
Cody from Denver. What's on your mind?
Hey, this one, I'll try not to get emotional here. We just passed the 4-year anniversary of the loss of a friend in the Colorado comedy community. Some content warnings. It was a trans woman, and the way we lost her was a little dark. I think you guys know what I mean, but I really wanted to talk about the impact that the transphobic rhetoric has kind of on a personal level, because kind of just going back and reminiscing and looking through social media posts that this person made in their last month, you can really kind of start to see the effect of a lot of that rhetoric on their mental state that led up to it. Now, this was like before Matt Walsh's "What's a Woman" and stuff like that, but there was still a lot of horrible rhetoric going out. And so one of the things that I had seen that they had posted in their last month was a rant, and I kind of wanted to share it a little bit. She said, "If you feel transgender people are often opinionated and militant in their beliefs, it's true because we have to defend our existence constantly. When I first transitioned, I was the type to live and let live. Life goes on. I'm still that way. I don't actively attack people with and about who I am and why I demand a place. I love talking about it in my comedy because there's a lot that needs to be said, and it's hilarious too." And she was a very funny comic, very fun person to be around. And then she says, "But then I get the random messages. You know, you're an effed up gay dude. Have you ever heard Joe Rogan's podcast? Here's a link to Ben Shapiro. What do you say to his views?" Then I hear conversations in public. "A dude with an effed up penis. You're pretty passable." Then I'm approached by people in public, often after sets. "Did you know you're just sick? You should be in a hospital. You have an acute mental illness." I never asked for people to send me these links or videos. I never asked to have the conversations. They're coming up to me and initiating it. Now, when I finally talk back or do a post like this, I'm the one instigating. I'm defending my existence every day from random people. People get defensive if they have to be defensive a majority of the time, is what she said. And it was met with a lot of support from our community. Now, what she's talking about there is definitely instances of I think, people that are very malicious in their transphobia, which is a huge problem. Now, about a week after that, she kind of shared the other side of transphobia within her family, where you get these folks, they watch Tucker or Shapiro or Rogan or whatever, and they're convinced that if you love your trans child, you'll convince them that they're not trans. So she had shared a screenshot from what her mom had sent her, and she said, "I love you so much I would die for you, but you aren't a woman, and what you're doing isn't right. Read Romans 1, homosexuality is a sin. You may not want to talk to me anymore, and God made you a man for some reason, and he never makes mistakes. I love you and don't want to lose you, but I'm hurting and angry and worried, and I think what you're doing is out of anger, depression, and is self-mutilation." So, in this post, she said, I'm not doing okay right now. So again, huge outpouring of folks being supportive in that, supporting her among our friend groups. Now, we had a scary day a couple weeks after that where she'd gone missing, and ultimately we never get to see her again. But it gets more frustrating because after she passed, we found the eulogy, the obituary that her parents had put in. This was up in Laramie, Wyoming. Really great history of being supportive of LGBTQ people there.
Right.
But they, in the obituary, they misgendered her. They used her dead name. And you really see that if you lose your child and that's not enough for you to realize, that you need to be kinder and rethink things. And the whole reason that they ended up leaving this world, you're still going to double down on it, was pretty awful. So we saw this in our community, and we made sure that our local magazine, Westward, here in Denver, wrote a proper obituary that really actually gave credit, properly gendered her, and celebrated her life in a way that I guess our folks weren't willing to. But all this stuff being said, this is where, like, when folks see us being activists to try to help trans people, LGBTQ communities and whatnot, I'll constantly hear like, oh, you guys are just a bunch of woke social justice warriors and you're just virtue signaling and looking for clout. And it's like, dude, I just miss my friend. I'm never going to see my friend again. And it's because, you're dumb. I identify as a whatever, meme that they have to see every day. And it just, anybody listening that is trans, no, there's a lot of love and support for you when you have to sift through all the bullshit out there that's dehumanizing you. But we care about you,
Yep. And, I can imagine it's also like times like this too, where it feels like it's never, ever going to get better. And I don't know that we're not going to go through a period of time where it doesn't get a little bit worse. But, I think hopefully, and I don't think it's being too Pollyannish to assume that it is just it is a matter of time. And it's hard to say that to people who are living through the pain that is exerted by this era and by people around at this time. Is what's the value of their life, or the pain becomes too hard to live for. But in some ways, also, helping people in the future. But it's really hard. I mean, it's hard to make that argument in this era. I mean, there's no doubt. But I really appreciate
Thank you for
the call.
sharing that story.
I hope you're right. All right, left is best. Have a good day.
I'm so sorry.
All right, thanks for the call.
Yeah.
It is that whole thing of like, oh, trans people are really militant. Like, you're the one with the sudden opinions about trans athletes, you weirdo.
Exactly.
Jesus.
Exactly. I mean, it's quite obvious what's going on in our society today. And people should know that. I mean, and, particularly like when particularly places where either identify as allies or should be allies. Like, none of these issues are seen in a narrow perspective. And I guess to a certain extent, I'm talking specifically about TYT. A lot of stuff went down. I'm still sort of catching up on this. The last I had heard was, or read was like Anna's tweet, like, I don't know, it was like 2 months ago or something, or whatever that was. And let me, be clear on a couple of things, because I don't want to spend too much time on this, but Em obviously came from TYT. She has a different set of relationships over there. I don't really make a lot of friends in this business, in part because I'm just a standoffish person. But also part of it is that, like, when I was in comedy, there was always this story that I had read about this group of comedians in the God, I can't remember what the name of this crew of comedians was called at the time, but Alexi Sales is one of them. He wasn't even one of the better comedians in my estimation of that crew, like Rowan Atkinson and I don't know, a bunch of others like there in the late 80s. But he had this thing where he said, like, the worst thing about success is that you become friends with Phil Collins and then you can't really be honest about how bad his music is. You can't make fun of his music. And I know it's a weird thing, a weird quote to remember for over 35 years. But that has stuck with me. So when people like say like, you're not talking about Anna or Cenk or this and that because of friendships, I can assure you that is not the case. I mean, I have nothing against Anna, but I've never been friends with her. Like I haven't been non-friends with her. Like I think I've spoken to her once, maybe. I don't know, in person. For me, the issue is this. Why what they're doing is wrong. And I don't know why they're doing what they're doing. But with this, let me just put it in contrast to like why I do this and why I think everybody here does this. We do this here because of the politics first. And then, like, I don't know what the percentage is, but I realize, like, we have to be entertaining, and I like being entertaining, and it's fun in that regard, and this and that, and you can't be just, and I don't even have the mental capacity to just be doing, like, 3 hours of dry interviews. But the point is that what dictates what we do here, and I remember like years and years ago, I would get arguments with a caller, like I shouldn't refer to what we do here as propaganda. Propaganda to me has always been a value neutral term. It is when you have an ideology or a set of issues that you're promoting or whatever it is, you are putting out content in it with an eye to that. I think like, you could argue that in some way, like all media is propagandistic in the sense that someone's making an editorial decision. Even what they deem to be newsworthy is making an editorial decision. The point being is that we are living in an era right now, which is undeniable, where the right wing, there's been plenty of reporting about this. The Republican Party, the right wing, the conservative movement, all those things, there's not a lot of daylight between any of those things. Specifically was shopping around for something to motivate its fundamentalist base. Mm-hmm. And fall in the wake of gay marriage, not causing typhoons and dogs and cats falling from the sky, they came upon transphobia. And the way that it ended up playing out was in the context of it dovetailed with some schooling issues and CRT and keeping people home from school and this and that, which is not to imply that this is something that's incredibly novel, but in terms of its growth, it is quite clear what's going on here. There's a concerted effort to do this. You do not spend $50 million in a campaign in Michigan on trans issues unless there is a concerted effort to do that. So that's one reality that lives, that exists right there. And the other reality may be that in your mind, you have an issue with what goes on in women's sports. I'm just going to stipulate that, I'm just going to say that's sincere, that you really care about women's sports, okay? And you have some really thoughtful or even non-thoughtful ideas about what should happen in women's sports. If you do what we do here, which is what is going to help not immiserate a specific group of people, or what is going to mitigate doing that, or how do we protect those people? Even if you believe deep down, like I feel very strongly about, women's sports.
Right.
Which, people can be a little skeptical of that case in some instances, but regardless, I'm sure there's somebody. It is incumbent upon you, you don't have to speak about it. Because it is contributing to an environment that is wreaking violence on a group of people in our society who have very little political or material protection. And that's just the reality of it. There is no excuse. I'm going to speak my mind. I'm not going to shut up about my opinions. It is incumbent upon you, and it's acutely problematic if this is the biggest online left of center outlet that exists.
Yeah. And I will say that if you do choose to speak about it, which I think I have in particular, I will go further and say I think it's incumbent upon you, if you are a part of the left, to be militant in support of trans activists, because I think the excuse that's given is that this is a wedge issue, and not conceding the point that somebody might have a different muscle structure if they're a trans person, blah, 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 is helping the right. I don't agree with that at all, actually. I think conceding the framing is much more helpful to the right than being an advocate. I think being an advocate, you're providing a counter narrative for a wedge issue that is being used cynically by the right, not being brought up by the leftist activists or the trans activists. They're responding to it with protection. It's inverted, the focus.
But even that, like, first off, we can see data. We can see data, and we know how this plays in elections.
We saw it in this last midterms. Yeah.
Now, you can show me a poll that says people don't want, trans women to play in women's sports. But I can also show you a poll that 75% of people want gun control. If you want to come and say that this is an electoral issue, come with data.
I can show you a poll that MLK had a 25% approval rating at the time of his death. I mean, we can't just be fighting for what's popular in the moment, because then you're saying that you can't change the framing around that.
But even if you're saying it's popular in the moment, like, it's not resonating from an electoral standpoint. That's why I think that is
granted too much to the anti-trans people.
Exactly.
Right. Like,
I think that is a bullshit excuse.
They aren't the post,
because you would lead with that. Okay. As much as we heard, like, it's one thing to say, like, I don't think, defund the police is the most artful slogan there is. But to harp on it, you're just doing the work of what it turned out to be the corporate Democrats who wanted an excuse for why they were going to lose their elections, as opposed to the reality of the whole thing.
In fact, that does help corporate Democrats. It's a good point.
And it's very hard for me to believe. Well, let me put it this way. It's incumbent upon people who do what we do to be able to make that assessment. And that is being I have no idea what's going on over there. I'm not in contact with anybody over there. And, my speculation and conjecture is no more informed, probably less so, than, people in this audience. But in terms of what I think is a responsibility and where a bar lies, while we're at it, in terms of the affirmative action thing, if anybody, including Jank, thinks that, black people are going to get more respect now in colleges because there's no affirmative action, you're insane. That's absurd.
Yeah. I mean, to put it as succinctly as possible, there's a finite number of things that we can focus on. Matt says that quite a bit. And I think it's incredibly important in our industry to focus on the things that are going to make sure that there are as much protections as humanly possible for trans people, for marginalized communities in this country. And I believe that focusing on the language of activists that are on the margins and that are incredibly anecdotal, is in fact serving a far right agenda.
100%.
Yeah.
And it is really problematic to have the biggest center of left, I don't know where you want to put them or where they would put themselves on some type of spectrum, whatever.
Progressives, Home of Progressives is the title.
I mean, it's a problem.
Yeah, and that's not just the two of them that work there, I want to say, right? Like, there are a lot of great people that work in TYT, a lot of great people who are leftists and progressives that I don't think want to be associated with this.
Right. I mean, but without even getting into the internal politics there, that's for people to suss out themselves. I have always had both a tremendous amount of respect for people who say, I don't like this work environment, and I'm going to do whatever I can to to reverse it. And if part of that means I'm going to quit this job and I'm going to do it in a public way, I mean, we've begged people to do that during the course of like the Iraq War and whatnot. Certainly there was a ton of that, you know, with the, I mean, I have a tremendous amount of respect for that. I also understand, because of the nature of the society we live in, that there may be people there who are like, you know, whatever it is, the job that I do here is not terribly easily replicated somewhere else. And this is a time of contraction with these things. And, you know, I've got college loans because you know, I just, you know, bought a house or I've got a car payment or whatever it is. I also, you know, have a tremendous amount of like sympathy and understanding for people in that situation. The bottom line is there are, you know, prominent voices that run that network or that project out that network. And it is wrong of them to be playing nuance. And this is, I'm trying to be charitable here, playing nuance with an issue that is so clearly drummed up to inflict pain on people. They're hoping for electoral gain. I don't think they'll necessarily get the electoral gain, although it strengthens, you know, if I'm in a red state and I can pass a law, I'm going to stay in office. It's not necessarily going to, you know, impact Joe Biden's reelection. It's not even going to impact like in the purple districts. I think it cuts against them in the purple districts.
And standing up for trans rights might get young Gen Z people out more than turning small people on the margins to vote Democrat.
Again, there's this is not a data first argument that people are making. And all the morons who've been making a data first argument, they had to end up like, you know, reversing themselves anyways on a lot of this stuff. Yeah. I mean, so like, I only acknowledge it because I want to say that I think that is a red herring and a bullshit excuse.
And if leftist critique causes you to change your worldview or adjust your approach that drastically, that is definitionally reactionary.
Well, I mean, I heard this from Dave Rubin on how mean leftists were and that they left him. And listen, if you're doing like any type of like show like this, you're going to hate everybody. Not that I should hate, like, I don't think there's any value in everybody hating you or not, whatever.
Means you're doing something right.
You're going to hate everybody because people are going to be rude and think that they're, and for it to alter your perspective and your analysis as to who is marginalized, who is in danger, what's going to provide the greatest amount of relief, help, support, material gain for the greatest amount of people, then you should be in a different business to begin with. But also, like, give me an effing break. There is no doubt in my mind that if we were sitting here and we're doing a right-wing show, I wouldn't be considered an asshole, and I would get invited on places, and I would be going and hanging out and skateboarding and eating sushi and this and that, like the warm embrace of these people. Like, again, what is that? Mr. Death? Was it Mr. Death? The Errol Morris
documentary.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Mr. Beast.
No, Mr. Death. This is a guy who was a lonely guy who was like a consultant for states when they would kill people with capital punishment. Mm. And somebody, you know, some Holocaust deniers, he had said something like the effect of like, oh, I find it hard to believe they could have used Zyklon B. And he became completely embraced by the Holocaust denying Nazi community and became like, just was living it up.
Yeah.
They were so much nicer to him.
They stayed for sushi. He stayed for sushi and bubble tea.
Stayed for sushi and bubble tea. And that is not a measure of the way you look at humanity. And that should not be a dictate as to what you express publicly. If you've got a job where you are public facing, it is incumbent upon you to think about the implications of your words. And just like when, you know, I celebrate the deaths of people who I think, you know, like when Scalia dies, I'm like, yeah, good. He may have been a good father, good son, good brother, good, husband.
Not my problem.
That's not the issue.
Yeah.
I know this guy's name because of what he's done to the country. Same thing with Breitbart. I would go on and on. You are judged by what you put out there. Period. End of story. Doesn't matter what's in your heart. I don't care. As far as I'm concerned, I could be the most right-wing guy in the world. I could, if I go home and I have like a Hitler closet that I go into and pray every night, but I come out and I say things that are anti-fascist during the day. I'll take that versus the guy who's going back and saying pure of heart, but coming out and because of nuances, Hitler had some good ideas. Trains ran on time and people were happy with the efficiency. That's not the way it works. What you put out is what you get judged on. Not what's in your heart. None of that.
Not what you're maybe capable of in the
Not what
future.
you're capable. None of that. What you put out into the world, when you do this, that's what you get judged on. Period. We are two-dimensional. Yeah.
And that's why we don't stay, and this isn't about personal branding or anything. Why we don't, it would have been, that's why we don't stay for sushi and bubble tea, basically. It's because we actually believe in this. I really do believe in this, so much so that I'm uncomfortable about talking about this on air. But I just think it's important to counteract it, obviously. So this, trans solidarity with Benny, who resigned from TYT. Seriously.